Hello, hello, my sexies. Today's episode is all about dating, relationships. We're going to be getting into situationships, anxious dating, avoidant dating, all of the things, all of the things. So, I have a special guest on today, Sabrina Zohar, and she's a dating coach and host of the Do the Work podcast. I found her on Instagram and I binged a ton of her reels. So, definitely go check the link in the bio, follow her. She has like tons of good tips, and I binge her content when I'm like struggling and I need like a slap in the face to stop settling. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Honestly, what an intro. Do you need me here anymore? You're doing a good job. Well, thank you. So, yes, my name is Sabrina Zohar. I'm a dating coach and the host of Do the Work podcast, as you mentioned. A little bit further in. So, I've been a dating coach for now about a year and a half. I really started working with everybody. So, it was a big, broad spectrum of like all. So, even backing up prior. So I have a clothing line called Software. So with Software, I was doing tons of podcasts and panels and things like that. Then that is when I started people reaching out to me of, oh, I want to be coached. And it happened very organically. And then starting the socials is where, oh shit, this became like a full-time gig. And then of course, Do the Work podcast kind of came after. And really where I think I shine the brightest and who I help the most are really people that are dealing with anxious attachment style, more so because I was her. And I think so many
Yeah.
people look and they're like, wait, you can feel secure. It's like, oh, you absolutely can if you're willing to do the work.
Yes. And I am also an anxious attachment style.
Are you?
And I think I've definitely gotten more towards secure. And I think now I bounce back and forth between the two, and then sometimes even avoidant because I've done the work, and now sometimes I distance myself maybe a little too much. So it's kind of like a mixture. I'm just a little bit of a mess, but on the way to be secure. And I feel like a lot of anxious people, they know how to get shit done. They know how to A plus, A, B, C. So you do this, you achieve this. But with relationships, you can't really do that. It's like there's not always a one, two, three step formula.
No, totally. And I think I would say with avoidant as well, because when we think about like if we kind of go micro into macro, like what are they even at the end of the day? It's like what is anxious, what is avoidant, what is secure? And then there's also, of course, disorganized, which is kind of an amalgamation of both. But simply put, it's like this is the way that you connect with people based off of your childhood. So that's like the simplest form. But essentially, what it is like somebody secure has a high sense of self and a high sense of others. So they can co regulate with people, but they can also self regulate. So they know that no matter what, they're going to be okay. They're secure. They're confident within themselves because they had caregivers growing up that were consistent, that were reliable, that showed them how to connect with other people, but also be by themselves. Then we would go to avoidant. And I see this all the time, or I hear it all the time, where it's like it's been villainized, where there's this like poo poo
Yeah.
against anyone that's avoidant. And really, all it is so avoidant, anxious, and disorganized, dismissive, kind of whatever you want to call it, those are all stemmed under the insecure attachment. So you have the secure and then you have the insecure. The only difference is how they're manifested, but they all root from the same, which is fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of intimacy. So, then avoidant, it's a low sense of others, but a high sense of self. So that is why they retreat and they only rely on themselves. So oftentimes the avoidant is put on the pedestal because they really believe I can only rely on myself. So oftentimes, like I had my friend growing up, both of her parents worked all the time. So that is where, to her, when they were working and she would go to try to have her needs met, they would brush her off. Now, as a child, you're looking at this going, okay, my needs are too much, I'm too much. And that's where those core beliefs start to come in. As an adult, we could look and say, yeah, your parents were working and they told you just to leave them alone. It's hard though, because as a child, because of egocentric age, we often internalize it as it's us as opposed to our caregivers because it's too much of a threat to do that. Then when we go to anxious, it's a low sense of self, but a high sense of others. So because anxious had super inconsistent, they always had a give and take, or they had to act out in order to receive either the attention or the love from their caregiver. And so that's where I fell. I was the poster child for anxious attachment style. And I had a father that was really inconsistent, always in and out. And because of that, I was always seeking the external validation of other people and had a very low sense of myself and thinking that everybody else can heal me and everybody else can fix me, without realizing, first of all, I wasn't broken. There was nothing to fix. And second of all, it was me just healing through my own shit and working through it to come out the other side. Then we have the disorganized, dismissive, kind of whatever you want to call it. They are low sense of self and a low sense of others. So that's why oftentimes people, when they're kind of all over the place, when it's not really a clear avoidant or anxious behavior, and it's they want the love and then they run away, oftentimes those are for homes of abuse or really hot and cold parents, because think about the parent that you wanted the love from, but then they would hurt you. So you didn't trust them, but you also didn't trust yourself. So I think once we kind of understand them a little more, what we start to realize is, oh shit, anxious and avoidant and all of these, one just turns outward. So an anxious just looks for somebody else to regulate, and the avoidant goes inwards and says, I can only trust myself.
Yeah. And detaches. I love that you brought up that the detached style, avoidant style is villainized, because a lot of people are like, oh, they're so narcissistic or they don't care. And I'm like, wait, they're struggling just as much as we are, just in different ways. It's like they don't know how to communicate. I don't know. Did you ever watch the Ultimatum, the queer edition?
I watch, like, I'm a Love is Blind kind of girl. I don't watch the Ultimatum. I think it just makes me uncomfortable, the concept of it, of
It's
like an
terrible.
ultimatum. I'm like, to me, it's just like, how broken down is the communication in your relationship that this is the stage that you felt you needed to take. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so it's that you mentioned avoidant and narcissistic. Oftentimes, so narcissists are all avoidant, but avoidants are not all narcissists. And until you have either dated one, or my father being one, and I have been with somebody, my ex was a textbook. It's not just, oh, the person likes to talk about themselves, or, oh, they remove themselves. It's like, I don't know, have you ever dated an avoidant, or I'm sorry, a narcissist? It is another level of abuse and mental fuck.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced that?
Yes, I have. I would say a few of the past ones were avoidant and had some narcissistic tendencies. I don't like to place like a sticker on them as a narcissist, but they were manipulative. So kind of ties into that. Yeah. And it like makes you feel like you're going crazy.
Especially with the gaslighting. Like I'm watching. Okay, let's talk about trash TV. Do you watch Love After Lockup?
No. Oh my God.
Thank me later. Thank me later. My boyfriend and I, he was like, listen, we're going to watch trash together. It's going to be the best. And so we started watching. There's Love During Lockup, Love After Lockup, and then Life After Lockup. And they all kind of follow along. And there's one guy on there, and I want to fucking punch this guy. He is so abusive to his girlfriend.
Oh
And it's like,
no.
not physically, but mentally, and the gaslighting. It's just the way it's like he's wrong and he knows he's wrong. It's like he admits after, like, yeah, I've been hiding something from her. And she's very clearly being like, you're hiding something from me. Like, she's not even freaking out. She's just like, you're lying to me. And of course, the gaslighting starts. Jesus fucking Christ. This is why I don't talk to you, because you make everything an issue. This is why I can't be honest. And it's like, as an outsider watching it, you're like, holy shit, that manipulation and that it's so. But when you're in it and you're already questioning your reality, it's a whole level. And that's why I'm like, no, that's not an avoidant. Like, that is a special. And like you said, we're not diagnosing these people. But if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck.
Yes. So that's a different level, but all in all, we're all humans trying to figure it out and struggling with things. I will say I do have a high sense of self. And I think it's once I really like someone, because I'm so picky and I don't really find those connections very often. And I didn't grow up with like a dad that was there for me. So I always felt like I had to prove myself in some way to earn that love. But I still value myself. But then when I find somebody that I like, it's rare. And so that's when my anxious attachment style comes out. So is that a weird thing?
No, so it's kind of like, it's the fallacy of like, I'm fine alone. And this, like, I can heal alone. And it's like, no, what happens is you get triggered. Your triggers start to come out dating. There is no way, like, you could literally spend 1,000 years by yourself. The second you go back into the dating world, there it is. And it's because relationships are the closest mimic to your relationship with your caregivers, because your friends, your business, nobody is going to see you in all of those lights. And a lot of the times, like, what it sounds like that you might be doing is like self-abandoning, where when you find somebody that you really like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's fine. I don't need to say anything because I don't want to push this person away. And that comes from not being necessarily as attuned to like that little inner child as maybe you could be. And it's not a knock against you. That just means that there's more exploration to do. But I think if you're somebody that finds yourself being like, oh, I'm a lot of the emotionally unavailable, like, no, I don't want to say anything to them and I don't want to rock the boat. At the end of the day, it's like you're sacrificing your own wants and needs for somebody else. So who's more important in this equation? And you could have high self-esteem, but then the second you're triggered, all of a sudden those core beliefs start to replay.
Yeah. Which is why it's good to date and practice. Like,
totally.
Kind of like practice with this partner or person, be like, okay, I'm going to practice with this person. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to, maybe they're not the all end be all, but instead of just cutting them off, let's try things out. So, what are your tips for those people that get into those situationships? They get into people who are not available and they just keep pushing their needs to the side.
So I think anytime we're talking about anybody that's in a situationship, the number one aspect of it is like there's a breakdown in communication here. There's either no communication or not clear and direct communication. Because when you're dealing with somebody who's secure, you telling someone, hey, I really like you. I've had a really good time getting to know you, and this has been a lot of fun. Their response is, yeah, me too. Thank you for letting me know. This has been really refreshing and I'm super excited to keep getting to know you. Let's say, if, hypothetically speaking, both people have the same intentions. And so I think off the bat, if you're somebody who consistently finds themselves in situationships and with emotionally unavailable people, there's a reality that needs to be faced, which is that you, in fact, are also emotionally unavailable, because there is usually a fear of intimacy that's underlying, that you go for somebody that you know is not attainable because, one, they start to reinstate your core beliefs so that you have to continuously prove your worth. And that anxious brain is looking for proof, and now it's being reaffirmed. So you try even harder. And because of the low sense of self, high sense of others component to it, they get put on the pedestal, and all of a sudden they're the end all be all. And what really starts to happen is you start to let your nervous system know, I am only safe if I have this person in my life. That's why you're constantly feeling this dysregulation. So if you've been dating somebody, if on the first date you are not taking the opportunity to ask somebody what their intentions are, you're doing yourself a grave disservice, because off the bat you're starting by hiding parts of yourself. And then along the way, if at any point, if you don't feel safe enough in that relationship or in this dynamic with someone to merely just express yourself or to share what it is that you want, if they shut down, they pull away, that's because they're fucking avoidant. And that is because they are now dysregulated. And then the anxiety starts to stem in, because then you start to get dysregulated, and then you just want to hear it from them. And then you go closer and they remove themselves. That dynamic isn't just going to change on its own. And so if you're somebody right now that's in a situationship, it's really important to start, one, addressing your own wants and needs. What is it you even want? Okay, you want a relationship, you want a partnership. Do you even want it with this person? Do you even like how you feel with this person? What about it do you like about this person? The fact that they're not being open, they're not being communicative, they're not being vulnerable with you. It's like, I'd love to know you like the idea of them. It starts getting into this whole psychological background of understanding what's happening. Mm-hmm. In a nutshell, start figuring out what the fuck you even want, and then articulate that. If that person runs or can't handle it, that does not say anything about you. If your core belief is I'm too much, that has nothing to do with this person. That is your nervous system saying that person is your parent. And your body is reacting as if that's your mom or dad that's leaving you. But at the end of the day, you barely know this person.
Yeah, exactly. One of my past clients is always giving, always trying to prove, always trying to show that they're good enough, where they're seeking that validation, they're seeking that need. And oh man, what's like the smallest step that has helped your clients when it's very extra. It's very like almost always looking like daily. Yeah.
I would say kind of the first, it's hard because I think the first step is the self-awareness around it of like, oh, I'm doing it. Yeah. There's nothing we can't be, because imagine it's like you're looking at her and you're like, oh my God, she's doing it again. But if she's not seeing it, they are not seeing it, there's nothing that you could do. And so it's like, that's the first step, is awareness off the bat. Then what comes next is like starting to even just ask a question yourself. where did I learn this behavior from? Even just getting curious. And so for me personally, like I kind of have this 3-step component that I do. So like when you're feeling super dysregulated, or like, let's say you're dating somebody and you're just like, they didn't answer you, you didn't get your text back. The texting thing is a bane of my fucking existence. But let's say you didn't get your text back and you're starting to spiral. First things first is you're dysregulated. And so many people try to go into problem solve, into like, okay, let me start to rationalize this and start to figure this out. When you're dysregulated, your nervous system thinks it's under attack. It thinks that you are not safe. So the first thing to do is regulate your nervous system. And there's a bunch of different ways that you could do it depending on where you are in that stage. But you know, whether that's dancing, you could punch a pillow, you can go for a walk, like doing some kind of movement even for 2 to 3 minutes to shake it up. But then really the 3 most important components in the healing process, if you're somebody like your client who is just constantly give, and is realizing I'm an empty can, I can't give anymore. One, also because that tells the other people, there's a whole psychological component of like people that are too nice. But first thing I would look at is like, what are the triggers? What triggers you consistently? If you don't even know your own fucking triggers, then how are you going to start to heal this shit? Then the second, start to learn to sit in discomfort. And by sitting in discomfort, I don't mean you just sit here antsy, can't sit still. It means being able to sit with that emotion, because statistically and psychologically speaking, it actually takes you 90 seconds to move through an emotion. What starts the clock and breaks a ruminate are the thought processes. So when you have that first thought process of, I'm not good enough, or he didn't text me because I knew he found another girl. If you actually sat with that emotion and was like, okay, where is this in my body? Where am I feeling it? If you like let it happen for 90 seconds, you'd actually be able to move through that emotion and be able to see it more clearly. Yeah. But because every time, but I knew he didn't like me because I'm not good enough. Well, because he must have found another girl. You keep restarting the clock. It keeps going 90 seconds, 90 seconds, 90 seconds. So if people can learn to identify their triggers, learn to sit in it, and literally sit and be like, okay, it's a spiky ball in my chest. Is it moving? Where is it? You start to realize when I work with clients, it starts to fade. And you're like, oh, I don't feel it anymore, because you let it run its course. And then the last step, the narrative. What are those thought processes? Or like what you had mentioned, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I always have to prove myself. It's like, where did I learn this behavior? Are there facts to back this up? You start to call yourself out. Okay, what are some contrary beliefs I can have? And I think for a lot of people, this sounds terrifying. It sounds like well above their pay grade. But I think if they gave it a try, even if you gave it a try, it's like the little monster in the closet. It looks so scary because of the shadow. And then you open it and you're like, that's it? It's the size of my pink.
It's
You've been through some.
Seeking that discomfort, sitting with it, it gets easier. It gets easier. It gets more comfortable. You start feeling better. And yeah, it just start small. I always try to tell clients, my audience, start with the smallest thing possible. What I used to do is like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to have this conversation. I'm so scared to ask one of the questions that are on your reels, whatever it is. Okay. And then feel the fear and do it anyways. And once you do it, you'll get a different sensation. You'll be like, oh, it wasn't as hard as I expected, usually.
It's like ice baths. You know, when you sit in the ice baths and you're terrified, and then you sit and you're like, that's it. This is what I was so scared of, 3 minutes. Because I think what I love to do too is I used to challenge myself, and I'm like, okay, you're scared. What are you so scared of? Like when you really start to narrow, I'm scared this person is going to leave me. Okay, but are they actually leaving you? What age is saying that? Is that a 7-year-old that's coming out? I'm scared they're going to leave me. Okay, so then that means that's that inner child that needs you. It has nothing to do. And like, it's funny. I had a client the other day and we were talking and she said, you know, I finally realized what you're saying. And I was like, finally. So what happened? What was that awareness? And she said, I dated this guy. He's awesome. He's great. He's super secure. She feels really great. And she said, he was texting me and she kept probing for more. And she was like, and he was giving it to me, and he was giving it to me, and he was giving it to me. And she's like, I literally had to drop my phone. And I realized, oh my God, it doesn't matter what he says. I'm not feeling better because it's me. And I was like, oh, thank you for finally having the awareness. And I was so proud of her. And I was like, you finally understand. It's not about hearing the words. It's about you believing that within yourself, because I could tell you how you're the most beautiful woman I've ever met 1,000 times over. You could think I'm a fucking idiot.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's same with people lose weight and they think they're instantly going to feel confident, beautiful, skinny, whatever the fuck word they're trying to get. And then they get skinny or whatever. And they're like, wait, I don't feel any better. In fact, I feel worse. I've had that happen with people and they're just like, wait, like I was doing this to feel this specific way. No, it's inside you. It's this power. It's this energy. It's this magnetism when you go out in life that people are drawn to, and it's hard to explain.
100%. Because it's like, I wish, because when you think about it, it's like, where did all these beliefs come from? They started as a child. And I think that like a lot of the inner child work and really starting to reconnect with yourself is still very new. But at least for me, it was the key that unlocked the door. Like it was really finally when I realized it, because it's funny, I had it when I was with my ex, raging fucking narcissist. He was my father. I married my father, like to a T. He was the exact same. I mean, down to like our age. It was creepy. Had the familiarity. And to me, that was so comfortable because that was a place that I knew so well, was being put down, being belittled, being gaslit, having my needs not being able to be met, and always feeling, okay, I have to do better. I have to do better. I have to do better. And I'll never forget when we finally broke up and he moved out and everything. And I was starting to go to therapy and meditate. And I kept telling my mom, I see us as kids. I see us as two kids. I don't think we connected as two adults. And now working through it, it was like, yeah, we performed a trauma. We were bonded over shared trauma, that we had a similar experience, and we were two children. We weren't two grown adults having a relationship. And that is where I actually started to shift my perspective and my thinking with my therapist, where she was like, I want you to now start to see every person you're dating as a child, because that's essentially all they are. They're an overgrown child stuck in a big boy's body or a big girl's body. And when you start to change that mindset, and then when you date, let's say the guy is acting like a fucking child, he's acting like a little bitch. And you're just kind of like, if you're looking at this and you, instead of going, oh my God, it's me, and you start to internalize it, it's because I did something wrong. And what did I do? If you can remove yourself and look and laugh at it, almost be like, oh, you're having a temper tantrum. Oh, you're literally being wild.
Is that what happened with your ex-husband then? Would you like get anxious and then he would detach and then he'd come back and just go crazy on you?
Oh no, this was legitimate. Like the one story I always remember is everything would always spin back to me, even if it was blatantly his fault. Sometimes it was my fault. And I remember I came home from work, and the night before he asked me to make him popcorn. So I made him popcorn and I left it on the thing. And he said, okay, I'm going to have some more tomorrow when you go. Okay. And I remember I came home that next night, and like in the morning I left, popcorn's still there. I was like, all right, enjoy. I came home and he's kind of standing there all proud of himself. And he's like, I cleaned the house and I did all this. And I was like, well, thank you so much. That was so sweet, babe. And I walk in and I was like, oh, it looks great. And I look and I was like, everything but the popcorn, huh? Very cute, joking. And that was it. All of a sudden he starts stomping on the ground. Nothing's ever fucking good enough for you. Here we go again. It's always an issue. What? Because I didn't clean the popcorn? You know what? I was going to take you to dinner tonight. I was going to surprise you, but fuck you. I am done. And he walks out. Wow. I'll never forget standing there. I was like, it happened so quickly that I didn't even know what just happened. And I was like, what? Then his mother calls me 20 minutes later. Who are you to yell at him about the fucking popcorn? You ungrateful child. And I was like, I'm sorry. Your mother is calling to yell at me, because she was like always involved in the relationship. And then he went outside. He called my mom, and my mom's response was, here's an idea. Go inside and talk to your fucking wife. And she hung up on him. And that was towards the tail end, where I remember he walked back in after like 2 hours of storming off, because we lived in New York. So he went and he just walked around. And when he came back, I remember just looking at him and I was like, are you done? And he just wouldn't take any ownership. And he was like, I just felt really, disrespected. And I was like, no. How you felt, not discrediting that. Are you done with the temper tantrum? And it's like that's when I started to almost start to remove myself a little bit and say, this is a fucking petulant child that didn't get their way. Mommy didn't say good job in the way that they wanted me to. So instead of me saying, oh my God, how dare I? How could I? Oh, I can't believe it. I made a big deal. This is so me. Fuck you, man. This has nothing to do with me. That sounds like a personal problem.
Yeah. One thing that I've been realizing with avoidant attachment style, it's the same thing. They don't feel good enough. They don't feel like it's never enough. And it's super deep rooted. That's what came up on that show, is this person kept leaving the room when they would want to have talks or communication or share feelings. But then you would actually go see them and they were like, nothing's good enough. I'm not good enough. So it's even deeper rooted. They're like breaking down and they don't want to share that.
Because think about somebody avoidant, they were never taught that emotions are safe. So to them, it's so overwhelming. They literally don't know what to do. And so they remove themselves. And that's why people will be like, oh, it's because they don't care. They moved on. And it's like, no, what happens is because the emotions are so terrifying, they just are like, nope, nope, not going to deal with it. That's why it could be 6 months to a year. And all of a sudden they'll have that come to Jesus moment of like, oh my God, I fucked up. And then that's why they can reach out to an ex. And like, that's why you'll hear back from them. Not all the time. I don't believe in that nonsense, but that could be why, because they were so terrified of those emotions. They literally just stuffed them away because no one was there to teach them how to have it. And this isn't, and it's the same thing with the anxious. I know a lot of anxious will come out and be like, well, they need to grow up. And it's like, yeah, baby, so do you.
Yeah.
You can't have a temper tantrum and text 17,000 times because you didn't get what the fuck you wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. This brings up like a lot of the memories of last relationships.
I was gonna say, is this bringing up some shit? I mean, because you've been doing this healing journey for how long now for yourself?
I mean, I dove in probably a decade ago, but once I had that relationship, it brought out the worst of us. Like, because we did feel that deep connection that maybe we both hadn't experienced with other people. So it brought out our trauma even more. And we both would always come back and like want to be together. But then our fucking worst sides of ourselves would come out. It did get better over time. It was 3 years of this. It did get better over time, but man, some of the things I would do or the things that he would do was just intense. Like to look back on, I'm like, I'm not like this normally.
Well, it's kind of looking like the pinch didn't match the ouch. It's like I freaked out over something, and it's like all that person said was like, I don't want to do this. And I mean, it's like the thing too, I think the one thing about kind of healing and dating and all of this that I think is a fallacy that really needs to be clarified is like, there is no healing where you're just going to wake up one day and be like, that's it. I'm good. All of this is fine. I've moved on with my life. You're going to get triggered even in relationships. And there's that also that fallacy. No. I just need to be in the relationship and I'll be fine. And then there's always something. There is always going to be something that's triggering you because until you start to rectify that component, it will come up in different areas. And we might not even realize that things like perfectionism, overthinking, procrastination, those are protective mechanisms. We think, oh, no, let me just throw myself into work. It's like, that's actually escapism. And that's actually avoiding doing the work that you need to do on yourself. Same with when you constantly ask, why are they doing this? Why is this guy acting like this? Why is this guy doing this? Why aren't they saying this? It's like, oh, here, I have one question for you. Why do you keep allowing it? Because the more you put it on everyone else and everything else, the less time you're spending on the shit that you should be doing. And now I'd be lying to you if I said my boyfriend doesn't still trigger me all the time because I'm human and I won't make it about him. It's not like I'm freaking out. I'll get triggered. And sometimes he'll even look at me and he's like, oh, you're dysregulated. I'm like, oh my God, you know me so well. He can just tell and he'll be like, all right, what happened? Talk to me. That's because I have one of the most supportive, amazing, secure men that I've ever met. But I only got this relationship because I also showed up as that as well.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I've been dating now for a year out of that relationship. And I've noticed like, okay, now sharing my feelings and being vulnerable, dude, it felt like the worst thing in the whole world at the beginning, but it has gotten easier. And it's even doing it with people like I'm dating that it's a practice. It's like growing that skill. Do it with someone that maybe you don't see a happily ever after future, but you can start sharing certain feelings with them. You can start sharing your needs and it's good practice, or with your friends even. I think that's a good way to practice.
100%. Setting boundaries, even with friends, people don't realize that it's like it's equally as important with friends and family. And it's interesting because you had mentioned earlier, like the one video I made of like, oh, I couldn't ask that. And so I had made a video of 3 questions to ask to gauge someone's emotional availability on the first date. Those are the 3 questions I asked my boyfriend. And it's funny because I've asked plenty of guys that, and I've seen all different kinds of responses. And that is why I didn't continue to date them. What was interesting to me was the responses I got. People losing their marbles. This isn't a job interview. This should be light and fluffy. Ew, I would run if anyone said that. And it's like, so that tells me you are uncomfortable with emotions. You are uncomfortable with vulnerability. You are uncomfortable being yourself. Because if it's so scary, if I asked you right now, how'd your last relationship end and what did it teach you about yourself? That's not asking you to tell me about your ex. I didn't ask you to tell me about your ex. I asked you to tell me how it ended. What did you learn about yourself? Because that's how you could, if you really attune to it, I'd ask, what's so scary about that question? But second of all, you could hear like a narcissist will say, all my exes were crazy. All of them were crazy. No accountability. So if you ask the right questions, then you can gauge. If a guy's like, yeah, my ex and I broke up 4 months ago, I don't know, it was whatever. Then you're like, cool, you haven't processed. Do you have the emotional bandwidth to do that? You can learn so much, not only about them, but yourself. Because you even like when you were like, oh, I would be uncomfortable. Then my next question would be like, what's coming up for you? What's so uncomfortable about it? Getting curious versus blaming or shaming ourselves. You can't blame or shame yourself into healing, but you can absolutely show yourself compassion and love and go into that direction.
Yes. And I love asking those questions. Ask them early on. What you said about bringing up your intentions at the beginning, if you're scaring them off, good. Like, do it before you build that emotional connection. Like, you don't even have anything. That's the best time to ask.
100%. And get clear, be clear, because what it does too is it also starts the precedence of open dialogue and communication. That is the only way. Like, people ask, my boyfriend and I fight, and I'm like, we don't. Not in the like, oh, we never fight, everything's perfect. No. We don't raise our voices at each other. We speak to each other because we don't let resentment build. We'll sometimes even do like little check-ins where like we're moving in together. So we're doing a little training now, and I'm staying at his house for like the last week just to like, okay. This morning in the shower, I just looked at him and I was like, I said, week 1 check-in, how do you feel? And he was like, I feel really good. I'm feeling really confident about this. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, how are you? I chatted. I said, anything you want to, any air, you want to air any grievances? No, just this and this. Okay, cool. Same. And we were like, all right, break. See you later. That helps to avoid building resentment, because if there's something that comes up when he says something that I don't like, the first thing I say is, I don't appreciate that. That made me feel very small and I don't like that. And he'll look at me and he's like, I'm so sorry. You're right. I could totally see how that made you feel like that. I sincerely apologize. I'll do better.
Yeah.
Done. Move on. Washed.
Yeah.
Or if he doesn't agree with it, hey, it didn't mean to say that. What brought this up? Or what came up for you? How can I support you further? Get curious. You don't need to jump down people's throat when you don't hear what you want. Maybe if a guy tells you, I don't know, I want to go slow, instead of being like, oh, okay, yeah, me too, totally. Maybe ask him, what does going slow look like to you? What does that mean to you? Does that mean we see each other less? Does that mean you just don't want to rush into a relationship? What does that look like?
Yeah. And it is scary, but it's worth talking about. It feels so much better on the other side. That's what I try and ingrain in your brain, is that you do it with discomfort, but you feel so much better on the other side. Clarity, communication.
100%. And then also understanding you're not being rejected. Like if you tell somebody, oh, I'm scared that they're going to walk away, I'm scared I'm going to get rejected. It's like, this isn't your fucking mom or dad. These are not your caregivers. These are strangers you met on the internet or at a bar that you literally have no idea. You probably don't even know what their mother's name is. And to me, I want to implement stranger. I personally think we should be implementing stranger danger in dating. And to me, it's when you were a child, your mother would tell you, don't you just go into a truck with somebody you don't know? What are you doing? You're just a stranger. Well, then stop fucking trusting somebody after one date.
Oh my God, I know. Oh, they put so much onto it. Okay, well, I have a different question. That's a little bit more, didn't just first meet. So you have someone, and I actually did the test on that video. And I was like, wait, shit, he is emotionally available, but he said he's not ready for a relationship right now because he just got out of one. But I'm at a point where I'm like, I'm okay with going slow, but I would like to do these uncomfortable questions and build my confidence with them and grow. So do you think that's healthy to kind of practice with them, but have the discussion about it?
I think it's about, the number one thing here would be about you being very realistic with yourself, that this is not I'm going to get him to like me if I just stick around and don't add pressure, or he's going to start to like me because he's going to see how awesome I am. Or maybe if I just work with it. All of that thought process is what's going to get you in trouble. If you're going into this saying, I got zero expectations, I don't give a fuck what happens. All right, fine. You're not ready for a relationship. I don't have those feelings anyways. That's cool. But I can definitely practice working on just being open and communicative. Great. But when somebody tells you, because like somebody saying I'm not ready for a relationship, then they're probably not emotionally available, because they're not going to be so readily available to sit there and be like, let me tell you about my childhood traumas and my family. Let me tell you about my deepest darkest secrets. Let me get vulnerable with you. Emotionally available people are ones that are not going to shy away from those conversations of like, hey, what do you see this going? To be honest, and it's like, you'll have honesty. If somebody is telling you that they're not ready for a relationship, to me, that is not an invitation to try to prove your worth or to try harder. But if you have a specific goal here of like, no, but I really want to practice communication with them, then there's also an element of reality of how long you're going to let that go on for. Are you just going to be, because you know what I mean? It's like you could get yourself into a situationship 6 months down the road where all of a sudden you guys are hooking up and da, da, da. No, there needs to be very clear boundaries around this kind of petri dish that you're creating, so that if this is experimental for you, that you are in control of the experiment, and that it's not all of a sudden that next thing you know, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, I have feelings for this person.
Yeah. 100%. And it's when they act like they want more, but then they say differently. And that's what got me in it last time.
And this is why actions don't speak louder than words, because in dating, they have to align.
Yes, I love that. Wait, say it again. What was that quote?
Actions, yeah. So it's like we're bred to be taught that actions speak louder than words, but they don't, because oftentimes, like that situation where when a guy is acting like your boyfriend but not wanting to put a title and avoiding it, actions and words need to align. One is not more important than the other, because I want someone that says what they mean and means what they say.
Yeah. And that's what I was in just recently, is that he was acting like a boyfriend. He was having conversations with me. We were going deep. We were talking about relationships and deep and feelings, and he was prioritizing me. And so I was like, wait, but then he says he's not wanting a relationship. I'm confused. So
what?
Yeah.
This could even be a really good challenge for you of, I understand being like, oh, well, I want to like learn my communication, but you know what, this is actually also really good for you to practice your boundaries of saying, well, I want a relationship, you don't, so I'm going to move on with my life. Because that feels difficult and challenging, and I don't like to use the word hard, because if what's hard for you is expressing yourself, if that's hard, I wish I had your life. Like I wish that's what was hard. That's why I'm like, verbiage is really important. Hard implies into your mind, I can't do it. No, it's too hard. Versus, this is uncomfortable. This feels foreign. This feels strange to me. I'm not used to it. Sure, your body can go, okay, well, I didn't know how to walk at one point, and here we are. But hard. And I think if you can try to challenge yourself in those moments, instead of being like, oh, but the potential, or maybe one day, to say, no, I'm going to put myself first, that could be equally as beneficial for you as using this person to practice your communication with, because you're still standing up for yourself and you're not self-abandoning your wants, needs, and desires just because the other person doesn't want what you do.
Yeah. And it is scary and uncomfortable, but it's worth it. It is. What tips would you have for the avoidant side? Because I see so many tips on anxious. Do you know anyone that like focuses more on the avoidant, or are they even looking like?
So the thing with the avoidance is a lot of them don't think it's them. So that's why a lot of people don't really talk about it, because the anxious are the ones that are more willing to do the work. The avoidants are, remember, low sense of others, high sense of self. It's not me, it's you. And a lot of the times too, because a lot of people it's a lot of this misconstrued, oh, they're avoidant. It's like, I don't know, man, they might not be avoidant. You just went fucking batshit crazy. Like, I think anybody would shut down if someone did what that behavior was. And so at the end of the day, the tips for both: the anxious needs to learn how to self-soothe and not constantly always co-regulate, whereas the avoidant needs to learn how to co-regulate and not always self-soothe. So the avoidant has to look at what feels so scary about having somebody in my life, because in their eyes, I'm going to be let down, they're going to leave me, they're going to abandon me. It's the same feelings, but they look at it as, okay, I'm only safe being alone, because that's what they were taught when they were kids. And so for them, it's again just coming, where did I learn this from? What's so scary? Because both people also have a fear of intimacy. And so intimacy is scary because that is the most raw aspect of yourself, where that person's going to see every nook and cranny. And that's why a lot of people will go after emotionally unavailable people, because there's a fear of intimacy.
So they can still get kind of intimacy, but without having it completely. They just get bits and pieces.
The shallow. You're like, oh, okay, I get the molehill, but I want the mountain now. And it's like, if you want that relationship of depth to where, like, sometimes I'll look at my boyfriend and we just kind of, we get each other, and I feel so safe, seen, heard, understood. I feel I've never felt so loved in my life and loved somebody else so much in my life. It's like, but you have to be willing to get messy, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there at the risk. Like, candidly speaking, we hooked up on the first date, and I'll never forget leaving. Didn't really like him that much. I remember thinking, he's okay. He's just not really my type. You know, I kind of
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
went for the same. And I was like, I'm probably never going to see him again.
Yeah.
Very grateful. But and then that helps because I didn't attach to the outcome. I wasn't like, oh my God, this has to work. I knew he had a big dick, so I was stoked and we had a great time. So I was like, all right, if I, and he's fine with me saying that. But if I'm like, all right, I get laid again, cool. But at the end of the day, he was very consistent and he kept showing up and he kept showing up, but so did I. And I was
Yeah.
reciprocal and so it's like, I just want anybody that's listening right now to start getting curious about what's coming up for them, because I think that is really where more of the work can be done. Instead of shaming or being upset with yourself, it's trying to assess, where did I learn this from?
Yeah. It's very important. And it gets easier with time. Now I feel like I've almost gone to the other side where I'm like too chill. Like I do care, but then I self-regulated for a long time and then I'm like fine. And then I'm like, wait, okay, I still need to be vulnerable at some point. Like I still need to share how I feel. I self-regulated a lot. And now I'm like almost too self-regulated. Like, okay, I do care though.
Like the pendulum swings so severely that it's like, can we just balance this out a little bit of like, is there fear? What's the fear of? Because the fear of intimacy is so overwhelming that, and so many people are not, they don't even know what that feeling is, because you'll see it. But I really want a relationship. It's like, yeah, but do you think because here's also the thing. A lot of people are familiar with being treated like shit. You know what's really, really hard? What's actually really, really difficult? Receiving love from somebody, because
Yeah.
that goes against your core beliefs as well. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And now all of a sudden somebody sees that you are, and you're like, what? I don't know what I'm doing there. Your nervous system is like, hey, I don't know how to keep you safe here. We've never been there before. We've never been down to safety land. I don't know what this is. And so
Yeah.
it's now, even then, it's like, that's also working with yourself to be like, no, I do deserve this. This does feel good for me. I am worthy of this. And allowing somebody, because that's why a lot of people go after the unavailable, is because the unavailable person is perceived to not see your value. So you now say, well, you must not see my value, so I have to prove it to you. Whereas somebody that comes and is available and says, I see your value, you're like, oh, you must not have any value yourself then if you see value within me.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
then you're
it's,
like, oh, bye. I'm going to leave you, even though they are available and they see your value. And you're like, there's this one problem that I don't like. Bye. But for the other person, they have one problem that you don't like, but you keep trying.
and they probably have a lot of issues that you don't like. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many things I don't like about my partner, and I'm sure he hates about me. Like, I'm fucking loud. I don't shut up. Like, there are so many things about myself. Like, I already know that. But that's also part of it, is like being able to laugh at yourself a little bit and be like, all right, so I'm a little anxious. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Versus using Achilles heel or this like scarlet letter on your chest. Like, instead of being angry at those parts, and that's what I've learned, is like, I used to hate all of the parts about me that have now made me successful, because
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with all those parts with myself. And I'm sure you could probably relate too. It's like you grow up hating so many things, and then as an adult, you're like, man, that's awesome. I'm stoked that I have that.
Yeah. Bring those out. Those vulnerabilities, those weaknesses can also be your fucking strengths. And people love you for
Absolutely.
it. Yeah. I used to be so scared to show like my sexy side, my loud side, my fucking like dom side, I guess. And people just love me for it. The other day I was like, yeah, I guess I'm a brat in like the dom sub world. They're like, yeah. Everybody in the hot tub was like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. And they're like, you know it. And I was like, okay. They're like, we love you for it. I was like, yeah. But then people like try to be in the BDSM world. They try to be a brat. Like they try to put on a mask and they're like, how can I be this person? And I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
So I don't even know, because I used to be very into being a submissive. So
Yeah.
I tried to be a dom once with this one guy. And I remember like I was trying to do it and I was like, I don't like this. I was like, I want
Yeah.
you to tell me what to do. Let me call you daddy, smack my ass and choke me and just call it a fucking day. So
Yeah.
and like now my partner, he's like, don't ever call me that. I'm like, okay, cool. Boundaries. But yeah, he's like, that's one rule. He's like, I'll do a lot of things to you. He's like, but don't call me daddy. And I'm like, okay, I could do that. But it's funny. It's like when you try to be something that you're just not, you're like, it doesn't feel like it resonates with me. And it's like, then when you find that you're a brat and you're like, fuck yeah, I am, it's like, embrace it.
And then people love you for it. And some people try to be that. So it's very interesting. Yeah, super interesting. I was like, okay, I'll accept that part of myself and just play into it. But I love switching the dynamics. But what I've found is like with a man, I'm very like to be in the sub and like them to take control. But I've realized that my natural dom likes to do it with like other people, like
Yeah.
in classes, in like, I don't know, just people that I don't have that connection with, but maybe I could build it. I don't know. I'm playing with the idea because people have been telling me that I'm very dominant, and I was like, oh, that could be fun. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see.
Play with it. And if it
Awesome.
doesn't work, like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so we're finishing up, but I am curious, what are some of the signs that show that they're emotionally available?
Available.
Yes.
So the biggest thing is like they don't shy away from conversations of what are we? What do you see in the future? Do you want to have any commitment? These people they know how to show up for you when you are also feeling something. So when you express your boundaries or if you say, hey, I didn't like that, or that doesn't make me feel good, they are able to support you in the ways that you need to be supported, even if that means they're just listening. These are people that ask you questions. They're genuinely curious about you. They want to show up. They're consistent. They're reciprocal. This does not mean that they text you every fucking day, but these people are making sure to let you know that this is a priority to them. Very little confusion typically happens with people that are emotionally available because it's kind of that age old thing of like, I feel like I can, anytime I go to them, I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I feel secure, and I feel like this person sees me. And so I think when you're out there dating, if you want to make sure that somebody is emotionally available, start listening to what they are saying when they talk about specific things like their past or exes or healing, their journey. And don't be afraid, because if you're not in touch with your own emotions to figure out what you want and what it is that you like and being able to express that, then of course you're going to go for people that are equally not as willing to do that. So it
Yeah.
starts as well with figuring out your own emotional availability and being able to sit in your own shit and say, okay, I understand where all this comes from and I'm able to articulate it.
Yeah. Powerful. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to share?
Really, I think just overall, the number one thing, the last thing I'll leave you guys with is stop using texting as a gauge to figure out someone's interest in you, because it has nothing to do with their interest in you. I could have people texting you morning and night that want nothing to do with you as far as a relationship is concerned. So that would be the number one tip I have, is stop focusing on the frivolity and the bullshit that's not actually going to get you the relationship that you genuinely want. And if you're still unsure about what that is, then maybe start at square one of what it is that you want.
Yes, I am 100% behind that because I'm not a big, huge texter and I don't want it to take up my whole entire day. And often I'm very busy with work, but I do like it here and there. So I agree with that. And a lot of especially women who want a successful man, they're not going to be at the beck and call on their phones. Like I don't, that's like you can have everything, but you also can't. Like if you want a super successful man, but you also want him to text you nonstop, like that doesn't usually go hand in hand.
So funny. My brother used to say that. He's like, all these women, he's like, you want this guy? He's like, he has to be doting on you, wealthy, have all the time in the world to give you. And he's like, what the fuck do you think these people are doing? You want them to take care of you. You don't want to work. Fine, fine. You want to go and be a housewife. He's like, what he's going to do? How do you think he's going to make all this money? Would it
Yeah.
be nice for us to marry the rich guys that are able to travel all the time? Usually they're the trust fund kids. And it's like, if you want a man with values, morals, ethics, ethos, and as a hardworking ethic, what do you think that's going to look like? So
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. Managing expectations here.
Yes. Awesome. Well, go check her out. Her link is in the bio for her Instagram and her website. And yeah, what's your Instagram? How do you say it?
So there's Sabrina.Zohar for personal or Do the Work podcast. And same with TikTok, Sabrina.Zohar. And now this new thread thing that's happening with Meta is Do the Work podcast. It's crazy. I've gotten like 600 followers in 2 hours. I'm like, what is happening with this world? No clue.
Yes, I too joined and I think I have 250, 300 followers. And I was like, wait, but do you have to manually go down and accept them? Why? I was like, just accept all. Come on.
I think it just accepts them. At least I will have to check. But yes, on all
Oh,
the socials, Sabrina.Zohar or Do the Work podcast. So not hard to find me.
awesome. I'm so excited. Go check her out. And thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having me.